Here at Pod TV, we are fortunate enough to have some of the top shows on the internet and all along those lines. And one of the shows that I'm always glad to hear about because he's always bringing us some much needed information is this show, which is Medicine and Science. And of course, we've got Dr. Michael Patmos, who is definitely a expert in the field. He holds an MD degree from the University of Nevada School of Medicine and is board certified in internal medicine. And he also holds a master's degree in medical management from the University of Southern California Marshall School of Business, and definitely is a certified physician executive and was a fellow of both the American College of Physician Executives and the American College of Healthcare Executives. So he does a lot of great and amazing things. And I also learned something about him before he gets into this very important discussion we're going to have about Mpox and definitely what some people are going to know as monkeypox and all along those lines. But what I did not realize until I was doing a little bit of background and everything, and I've actually got to teach you about this because my dad was involved in this when he was much younger, and all along those lines, he's been having his own health concerns, but he still swims and he still is involved in swimming. Hopefully, he'll get back to the swimming pool shortly and everything. But he used to be a scuba diver back in the day, and he also used to ski. And I saw that you are both a scuba diver and a skier, and an avid scuba diver and a skier and that. So I had to teach you about that. I'm going like, he's got some mad skills. He's also in that recreation space. So I don't know if you're going to get into that, or maybe we'll get into that after your presentation, but I had to bring that up. I'm going like, hey, this man is still out there in his age, still out there, probably getting on the ski slopes and even getting into the scuba diving as well.
Well, thank you, Mark, for that wonderful introduction. I think I've been a doctor for over 43 years and I still practice. And I think that if I didn't have some recreational outlets, I don't know that I'd still be able to practice. So, getting out on the mountains and skiing a little bit and scuba diving keeps me young and keeps me rejuvenated. And so I think it's all part of having some work-life balance. Well, thank you also for mentioning the other credentials, in management as a physician executive. I'm very proud of those. But in my heart, I'm a clinician, always have been, always will be. The stethoscope comes first. The spreadsheet and the physician executive work was always a means to an end. I was always trying to influence healthcare organizations to do the right things to benefit patients. So I want to talk today about a serious problem, Mpox, or what used to be called monkeypox is now called Mpox, and bring a little clarity to this situation for the layperson. So what is Mpox? Mpox is a viral disease. The virus is part of the orthomyxoviridae group, or also called an orthovirus. And it is in the same group of viruses to which smallpox belongs. Now, smallpox, as you probably know, doesn't exist anymore. It was eradicated from the face of the earth some decades ago because of immunization. The World Health Organization collaborated around the world and brought vaccination to most everyone on the planet, and that resulted in the eradication of the disease. Smallpox doesn't exist anymore. And it was a horrible disease. Smallpox causes these disfiguring blisters and high death rate. It's estimated that over the course of history, some 300 million people have died of smallpox, going back to the beginning of the human race. 300 million people have likely died. It was a scourge of humanity. That disease is gone, but a related illness, Mpox, is still around. It's not smallpox, but it's in the same category, family of viruses, the orthoviridae group. Well, Mpox has been circulating around mostly in Africa for the past couple of decades, and it created some attention and some concern. It then spread out of Africa and came around the world, and it created a pandemic. And and it was in 2022. And in that pandemic, I think about 100,000 people got Mpox, including in the United States, and several hundred died. We're not talking about numbers, anywhere comparable to COVID, where millions of people have died, but nonetheless, a virus that spreads around the world and infects 100,000 or more people and kills several hundred of them is still, of concern. It happened in the United States. We lost many Americans died of that Mpox, the early Mpox, and it was primarily shared between men who have sex with men. So it kind of got that sort of a stigma attached to it. But a vaccine was rapidly developed, and many men in the United States who are at risk were vaccinated, and the numbers tapered down. But that, like other viruses, that mpox has given rise to new strains and more virulent strains. And there's a new mpox now that is more deadly, and it is spreading rapidly in Africa. It is now, I think, in about 10 or 11 African countries. The center of it is in the Democratic Republic of Congo, or I think that used to be Zaire. And in 2022, or I'm sorry, just in the past year, this more virulent mpox has infected 15,600 people in Africa, and nearly 600 of them have died. Now, what's important about this mpox is that it's more contagious, it's more virulent, it's more lethal, and it's not just spread among men who have sex with men. There's also community spread and spread within households, and many of the victims of this disease have been children. So it's not only a disease that can kill you, it is a disease that is disfiguring, and these people who have this suffer. They suffer terribly. It's a horrible thing to watch people suffer and to watch people die. And there are people suffering and dying in Africa right now. Of course, there's a concern that it will spread beyond Africa. And this new, more aggressive mpox already has. There's only a handful of cases, but it's alarming because it's very contagious. And there's now a handful of cases in Europe. I think one in Sweden and one in Germany just the other day, one case in Thailand. So it's clear that it has, spread beyond Africa. And the fear is that it, could spread around the world and could affect a lot more people. I don't think anyone is predicting anything as big as COVID, but still it is concerned because this is a terrible disease. And, as human beings and as physicians, we don't want people to suffer and die needlessly. Now, because of this, the World Health Organization just last month issued a public health emergency of international concern, basically raising the red flag about this and calling for collaboration and coordination in an effort to try to get vaccine into Africa and to help people in Africa contain and limit this outbreak. And it's such an important issue that the New England Journal of Medicine, the most prestigious and important medical journal in the world, this is the New England Journal of Medicine. Every medical student you get beat up if you don't read this. You better carry it with you when you go on rounds in a hospital where your professors are going to tear your head off. But I still get the New England Journal of Medicine because there's always something profound in every issue. This is the current issue, and in the current issue there are editorials. The first editorial is the Mpox Global Health Emergency, a time for solidarity and equity. And this editorial makes a very important point. And that is that typically, historically, resource-wealthy countries, the United States, Europe, whenever there's an outbreak of a disease, we get all the benefit. We get the vaccines. The money comes pouring in. Everything, is focused on these resource-rich countries. But what about Africa? What about other parts of the world? They don't get the same level of attention. They don't get the same level of love and care and devotion and resources. Right now, it's estimated that they need about 15 million doses of Mpox vaccine in Africa to protect people there. And the World Health Organization has called upon the rich nations who happen to have Mpox vaccines sitting on a shelf unused to donate it. And I think it was the Netherlands, I'm not sure, some country in Europe donated 200,000 doses. The United States, 50,000 doses that we've donated to Africa. They need 15 million doses. So this editorial is entitled, I love it, it's called A Time for Solidarity and Equity. And this editorial is all about the time that we must change. And we've got to change how we approach these things. We can't rushed to save the United States and rushed to save Europe and allow children in Africa, to suffer because we can't get the resources there, and they don't have the resources, as they're not a resource rich area of the world. So this is a very important editorial. It's not only scientific and infectious disease, but it's also humanity and ethics and integrity, and bringing we need to have more equity around the world on how we approach these things. So I wanted to share that. And then I wanted to tell you that here we have this public health emergency of international concern, children dying in Africa. And there's a contrarian point of view. Dr. Robert Malone on his Substack wrote an article basically calling all of this fear porn. He said it's biologic. He said it's a form of bioterrorism. And others like Dr. Malone and Dr. McCullough suggest it's just a scam to sell vaccine, to pump money into the pharmaceutical industry, and for the global elites to take control of your mind and ram vaccinations down your throat, and it's all about medical freedom. I'm appalled by that, absolutely appalled by that. Here we have documentation, proof that thousands of people have been infected with a very severe disease that's killed nearly 600, a lot of them children. And by the way, they're not all men who have sex with men. Dr. Malone said, well, your chances of dying are very low, and it's only men who have sex with men, so what? Well, don't people of different sexual orientations deserve to live too? Are they less important? So I'm appalled by Dr. Malone's comments in his Substack article. I find them to be really despicable. And, to compare a recommendation in an editorial in the New England Journal of Medicine and the World Health Organization and disparage it, describe it as fear porn, and essentially calling it a hoax and calling it a form of bioterrorism I just find that despicable. Dr. McCullough even went so far as to suggest that this was a gain of function virus that was created in Africa to sell vaccines. I posted on his LinkedIn if he could suggest what lab in Africa is capable of doing gain of function research and creating this, and he didn't respond. But I think it's so important. And the other important thing to mention is that, these World Health Organization, these are world-renowned infectious disease experts. This New England Journal article, world-renowned infectious disease experts. Dr. Malone has 1 year of pathology internship, 1 year of pathology research residency. He's not board certified in anything. He's not even board eligible. He's not an infectious disease doctor. He's got other credentials in research. I'll grant him that. But here we have experts in infectious diseases, identifying, concern for the world. And we have a doctor who's not even an infectious disease doctor, just laughing it off and telling millions of people, he has a reach of millions of people, that it's all just a big hoax, that it's fear porn, and that it's just bioterrorism, and just ignore it. Don't worry about it. So what if, few kids in Africa die? So what? I am appalled by that. I believe this is a time for solidarity and equity, and we have to rise above this. We can spread information around the world now instantaneously. We've got to do a better job of bringing more equitable healthcare to everyone around the world. And right now, children in Africa are suffering, and it's not a time to laugh at it and make a joke of it. So that's my comments for today. Happy to entertain some discussion.
So on this show, we often discuss COVID, and there's some brief, temporary good news about COVID. COVID has 2 peaks a year, a peak end of summer, beginning of school, then there's a dip, and then there's the big peak of the year, end of December, beginning of January. And this year's dip, which we're in, is lower than the dip, both in Los Angeles and in the whole country, is lower than the dip in 2022 and 2023, which is a nice little COVID rates in LA are 1/6 what they were, a month and a half ago. It's a nice little kind of vacation from so many people being infected.
That's a very good point, and it's been talked about a lot in the medical literature. And there are two primary reasons why we're seeing less COVID and less severe COVID and fewer deaths. And that is, number one, a lot of people did get immunized in the beginning. Most people are not up to date with the latest COVID vaccine. Only 20% of people are in the United States. But a lot of people did get the first series. And contrary to what people say, that vaccine does produce some long-term immunity. The antibody levels may rise and fall, but the B memory lymphocytes retain the memory and are able to generate antibodies. So there is some enduring immunity, even going back to the early vaccine for COVID. And to add to that, people have gotten infected. Most people have now been exposed to COVID, and there is a natural immune response as well. The vaccine-induced immune response is superior to the natural response, but they're both good. And when you have both together, a vaccinated person who was exposed to COVID, a COVID patient who was vaccinated, their level of immunity is higher. And that's now why we're seeing improvements, just as you've described. It's due to the fact that we're now building up a wall of immunity. It should be and could be a lot higher. But that's what's so we're having some success. And even though people like Dr. Malone and Dr. McCullough have done everything they can to discourage vaccination, we still have had success managing this because of vaccination.
So let's talk about the mpox, the spread that is going on right now. And what's the best way to contain that situation so that we're not going to see it spread here in the United States or somewhere else? I mean, if I wanted to go travel there, what would be my best thing to do?
Okay, so this you've asked a brilliant question.
A lot of questions, I know, but I travel a lot.
The most important thing right now is we have to get vaccine into Zaire, into the Democratic Republic of Congo, into the countries in Africa. We got to immunize the at-risk population. Who's at risk are, certainly, men who have sex with men, their contacts and their family contacts, and within households where the disease has been found. This is not a disease that just anybody kind of at random is likely to get. So there are targeted focused groups for immunization, and also isolation during the course, because it's a contagious disease, isolation and contact tracing. So this is the standard methods of infection control and epidemiology, and the things that CDC in the United States. So there's also CDC Africa, by the way. All of those measures that are typically done to control outbreaks are what need to be done here. And if we do that, with solidarity and with equity, we can bring this thing under control and stop it from spreading around the world worse. But right now, it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. It's not getting much attention. And then you have very influential people laughing it off. That's not a recipe for success.
No, I mean, we kind of had that problem here in the U.S. when COVID hit. They were not taking it serious and dragging their feet until it was too late. Nobody did the math that, it took 2 weeks for anyone to have symptoms to know that they had it. So those 2 weeks they were spreading it, and how many thousands and thousands and thousands of people that just ripple effect did. Nobody did the math. I mean, it was still, Trump said, I'll do something when we have 1,560 people infected. Like he had a specific number. I remember very well, because I'm like, what moron would wait if you know that many people have it, then I don't even know what the volume number is of how many more people will have it. But it's not that I think they were misinformed. I think they were just making jokes about it.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about relative risk? One way that anti-vaxxers get into people's heads is they talk about vaccines being risky, which they are, well, at a rate of about 1 in a million, some of them. Can you talk about relative risk?
Sure. Everything in medicine has risk. There's nothing that physicians do that doesn't have some level of risk. Just drinking water has risk. You can get hyponatremia if you drink too much water. But all of our medical interventions, even the ones we take, for granted, the simple ones like taking penicillin for a strep throat or taking macrobid for bladder infection, having a minor procedure, a hysterectomy, which is not a minor procedure, but having had loved ones who underwent hysterectomy, it's not a minor procedure, but just surgical procedures, medications, all the sorts of things that we in medicine do all have risk. Nothing is 100% risk-free. And what doctors have to do, and what we do, and what the medical literature does, is we weigh the risk-benefit ratio. What is the relative risk of this intervention versus not intervening? And there are times when there are interventions that are too risky, that are just not worth the risk, and we don't do them. We discourage them. Insurance companies will deny them for that reason. So we do evaluate, but unfortunately, there's always risk, and we have to weigh the risks and benefits. When it comes to vaccination, generally speaking, across the board, there is no comparison. The risk-benefit ratio is enormous in favor of vaccination. Vaccination across the board is the most important and effective thing human beings have ever done in history in terms of public health. More lives have been saved, more misery and suffering averted because of immunization than anything else we have ever done in the history of human civilization. There is risk to vaccination, and some people, unfortunately, do experience serious side effects. But that's the rate is ridiculously low. Let me give you an example. These are just some rough numbers. With respect to myocarditis from the COVID mRNA vaccine, it got a lot of attention. There are last I checked, there's about 340 cases of myocarditis confirmed as a result of the COVID vaccination out of 13.2 billion doses. So 342 divided by 13.2 billion gives you an idea of what the relative risk is. And oh, by the way, most of those myocarditis cases were mild, transient. Yes, a couple of people have died. But if you look at the relative risk, when you have COVID that kills, at the beginning, killed 1 to 2% of all the people 1.2 million Americans died of COVID in the United States, 7, 8, 9 million around the world, conservatively. You can't compare the two. So to answer your question, a long-winded answer, vaccination, immunization has far more benefit than risk, but nothing is risk-free.
Thank you.
Just really quickly,
that's
Dr.
everything. That you're right. Nothing is risk-free. I mean, we have to, but I think that there's a balance in our lives that we can be doing. I know, there's a lot of risk for some people with vaccines because I was told one time that I have allergies to some of the things that are in some of the vaccines. So, but this is what I do. One, I take very good care of myself. Doesn't mean I don't get sick, but a lot of vitamin C. I eat well. I try to keep all of my immune system up through other means. But my doctors talk to me before I take a vaccine shot. Like we discuss what's in it. Not that I'm afraid of them. I'm just afraid of the ones that I might be allergic to. So we discuss them. And that's what I think people fail to do. And that's why there's so much fear is people do get sick from them because they just walk up and just get a shot. I mean, and I don't think everyone's body is capable of doing that. And
you're right. There are people who should not be vaccinated. There are clear-cut contraindications. For example, with certain vaccines that are produced in eggs, they're generated in eggs. The people, if you have an egg allergy, you can't take it. There are some live vaccines that people with who are immunocompromised shouldn't take. So yes, there are always indications and contraindications, and it's incumbent upon the physician to talk with the patient and make sure they identify any potential contraindications.
And I think most of the complications came from people not investigating enough for themselves.
And some vaccines cause more symptoms than others. The new shingles vaccine, which is more powerful than I think the previous one, you don't want to get shingles because shingles is the freaking worst. I mean, in terms of suffering, it's probably, the pain is, I don't know if you can compare, probably like monkeypox, which you definitely don't want, but it's super painful. But, my wife got the powerful, but we get every vaccine, my wife and I, and the shingles vaccine kicked her butt. The second dose brought on a little bit of sciatica for a couple days.
Yeah, I've heard that too. The second dose is harder on, and it was on my husband. My husband and I got the shingles shots, and the second dose wiped him out for a day or two. So,
but you don't want shingles. A big,
I don't either.
Your body blisters up.
I hear some hot off the press news for you. Just the other day, I forget what journal it was in. I don't know if it was a New England Journal. I don't think it was. It might have been in JAMA. There's some solid evidence now that herpes zoster, the virus that causes shingles,
yes,
is now linked to and has been identified as an independent risk factor for Alzheimer's disease and for dementia. And that has raised a lot of discussion right now in the medical literature about the role of viral infections in dementia. We know, for example, that people who survived the Spanish flu of 1918 are much more likely to get Parkinson's disease later on. So there is something, it's not worked out very well, but there is viral infections are somehow a risk factor for subsequent dementia, including zoster, the virus that causes shingles. So I think, I don't know, take it for what it's worth. It's an interesting new information.
Let me bring up some potential misinformation, because I saw this on Twitter, which is just packed with BS. But I saw that, auto insurance rates have been exploding. And this one tweet talked about that they think it's because of COVID, because accident rates are up 15% because COVID cooks your brain and also maybe makes you a little angrier.
I think that's correct. I think it does. There's some neurocognitive impact to COVID long term. And I think all you have to do is just watch Aaron Rodgers lately. Some of the passes he's been throwing, awful. No wonder the Jets are doing so bad. I think Rodgers is maybe was impacted by it. He needs to retire.
I think that any virus can impact anybody in many different ways. Again, it's your body. Everybody's different. I think you just need to take a look and listen to, what you have to say. Listen to the doctors, listen to information like this, and do your follow-up. Yeah, I thought that one part of, what you were mentioning was a bit despicable, where, what they said about, gay men, but unfortunately, there's going to be people out there like that who aren't going to want to help people because they are prejudiced. I don't know how you can call yourself a doctor if you're prejudiced, but
it's against the Hippocratic oath. Whatsoever house I enter, I go for the benefit of the patient.
So COVID is a particularly inflammatory disease. So if you have any part of your body that's already a little angry, COVID's going to maybe make it angrier. And with my wife, she got a mild case of COVID, but it made one of her teeth go crazy because there was already something going on with it.
Interesting. I think we still don't know everything and all the effects of COVID. I do know I read up a lot on it before it hit our country. There were a lot of articles about it, even a month or two before it got here. And how it just can rip apart the lungs and rip apart and create a blood storm in the body.
I've seen it.
Well, I'm sure you have. I mean, I just saw it in articles, and this was before anyone in America was even doing anything about it. In fact, I have a huge article that I still keep in my bedroom about it. So yeah, it's, I think information like this, bringing about awareness, talking about it, not in a fear factor way, but just talking about what's real. And I appreciate your time, Dr. Patmos, because I think this is very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you.
So is there something with the way COVID is shaped that makes it so hard on your body?
Oh yeah, it's pointy.
those spikes, like little nails.
Pointy. It's called corona, right? Because of a crown. It was Spanish. and and it looks like have you ever seen those pine balls that have the spikes all over them?
Yep.
Yeah, my buddy who
That's
was a
what they look
maniac used
like.
to take
Right.
chestnuts, which are spiky, into the movie theater and throw them, and he'd toss one, and then he'd hear somebody yell because, yeah.
It's like those, but if you take one of those pine balls that have the spikes all over them, that's what a sycamore sweet gum balls. That I had them in my office when COVID came in. I would hang it up there and go, "This is what's getting in your lungs," you know. So, not to scare people, but to make them wake up and realize this is not anything to lay low on or be. You know, if there's a vaccine, get a vaccine. You know.
So are other viruses less spiky, so they don't tear you up as much?
You know, I'm not enough of an expert at that to be able to comment off the top of my head. But you made a great point, Kim, and that is the COVID virus is part of a family of viruses called coronaviruses. And coronaviruses are all characterized by having spike proteins on the surface. The common cold, it can be caused by a different coronavirus. I think rhinoviruses belong to the same basic family, and they all have spike proteins on the surface. So what the spike protein does, the spike acts like a key, and it fits into a receptor on the cells in your respiratory epithelium. And when the spike fits into the receptor, it's like it opens a door and it allows the virus to get inside your cell and then take over the cell machinery and produce more copies of the virus. That's how the host becomes a virus factory. And so blocking the attachment of the virus is very important. And so that's why the spike was the target for the mRNA vaccine. And I have to tell you, I'm very excited. I just want to share something. The other day, I was able to establish a personal relationship with Dr. Caitlin Carrico, who won, along with Dr. Andrew Weissman, won the Nobel Prize for the mRNA vaccine. And Dr. Carrico and I are now on a first name basis communicating back and forth. I am so honored and privileged to be able to call Dr. Carrico a friend, and we shared some interesting information, and I hope to continue to chat with her. I've never met a Nobel Prize winner before, but you think about it, her and Dr. Weissman, it's estimated they have saved about 20 million lives. I mean, who at the end of the day goes home at the end of the day and says, yeah, I think I saved about 20 million lives today.
Nobody's
a superhero, right?
Maybe we can get her on your show and everything. That would be great. Maybe we'll have
bring her on. We would love to meet her.
Oh, amazing. We got her on the show here and all around those lines. So bring her here. And
that's what I love about this. We can be anywhere and beam in anywhere, like Nick said.
I'll share this with her. I'll share this with her and see if she's interested.
We love it.
I know we would love to have it. Just really quickly, because I know we were winding down toward the end and everything, but Dr. Patmos, one of the other things that came up medically is this whole notion that kind of plays into the vaccine, but not totally. How important should we be thinking about our cognitive health and everything? Because I know that it's recently come out that people think that Trump is in cognitive decline. They're saying that that's part of the reason that Biden got pushed out, and there was even Trump cracking on Obama, who is in his early 60s, about my age and everything. But I'm just wondering, how important should we think about our cognitive health, just in general?
Oh, well, you know, look, we have an aging population, and there is a thing called the silver tsunami. You know, we all grow older, and it is a natural consequence. We no one lives forever, and the body does age. It's pre-programmed into our genetics, and the brain ages. And most people in their 80s and 90s begin to show some measurable cognitive impairment, and it can start much younger. And being aware of one's cognitive health is extremely. There are ways to keep your brain working, and stimulation is very important. I recommend it to my patients over the years that as they retire, take up a hobby, take up playing piano or something that stimulates your brain. So cognitive health is very important, and it's also very important to realize that we have a wave of people with dementia that's already crashing upon our shores, and we don't have adequate healthcare resources available in long-term acute care and long-term care, convalescent care, memory care for this aging population with Alzheimer's. We're totally unprepared for it. Certain states are worse than others. Hawaii, we have a total lack of long-term care facilities in Hawaii. It's a big problem here. And I think around the country, we're starting to see now the silver tsunami of elderly people with dementia crashing on our shores, and we're unprepared for it.
here's how keeping your brain active defends against Alzheimer's and other aging effects. You've got about 10 billion neurons in your brain. Each neuron is connected to about 1,000 other neurons, and it's those connections that help you think, recall memories. And if you keep your brain active, your brain keeps sending out, making connections. And even if something is eating, and like Alzheimer's makes this gunk that tends to choke off connections, but if you keep building new connections, then you can still have your brain turning to Swiss cheese, but it still works. They found this in a famous study of nuns who stayed mentally active and lived into their 90s, and they were fine. They didn't show any symptoms of Alzheimer's, but they cut open their brains when they died, and so their brains were all chewed up, but because they had all these extra connections from staying active, doing crossword puzzles, reading, talking, they defended against the damage.
And it's so interesting to me that playing a musical instrument is not only brings out the humanistic art inside all of us, but it's also very good for your brain. So I've over the years that I was in private practice, I used to recommend to many or all of my senior patients that if you have free time and you're retired and you have some free time, don't just sit and watch TV or go out to eat. Take up a musical instrument. Pick up anything. Just go take lessons. Play guitar. Play piano. It's good for your brain. It's a good thing to do. It stimulates the brain. You're absolutely right.
Albert Einstein was
I dance, but I'm going to try music.
Albert Einstein tried to play the violin. I guess he wasn't very good at it.
Well, he had other strengths.
So anyway, it's been great talking with everyone. We look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at 2 p.m. on Medicine and Science with Dr. Michael Patmos. Take care, everyone. Mark, are you ready to take us out?